801, authorizing the Department of Neighborhood Development to apply for, accept, and expend federal FY17 Continuum of Care grant funds not to exceed $28 million from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to support programs that provide services and housing to the homeless. Thank you for being here. As the chair of the Committee on Homelessness, Mental Health, and Recovery, I'd like to welcome you and remind everyone that this hearing is being recorded and broadcast live on Comcast 8 and RCN 82, as well as streamed on the internet live and for further broadcast. We ask that you please turn off your cell phones and anything else that makes noise. Also, if you haven't done so, please sign in, as the sign-in sheets are at the outside door. If you'd like to testify, just check the box, and we will call you up at the end of the hearing. I don't think we'll have public testimony today. I would like to just say I'm so happy to be here and honored to sit on the City of Boston's Continuum of Care Leadership Council as chair of the Committee on Homelessness, Mental Health, and Recovery, and know firsthand the amazing work that, Sheila, that your team does on this council and on this COC, as we refer to it, and look forward to being able to do some great things going forward as we accept this grant. I think we'll turn it over to all of you, Chief Dillon and your team, if you'd like to introduce yourself and present what you've got for us.
Thank you for your support as we've really worked very, very hard to house many of our vulnerable, our homeless in the city of Boston. You have been a great partner over the last several years and really have rolled up your sleeves. And I just want to acknowledge that before we begin. So I'm joined here today with my colleagues, Rick Wilson, our Deputy Director for Administration and Finance, Katie Cahill, our Acting Director for Supportive Housing, and Bob Cahill, our Deputy Director for Policy and Research. And Elizabeth Doyle retired on Friday, and Katie Cahill is now going to be overseeing our application to HUD this funding round. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Katie, and she's going to walk you through what we're looking for today.
Thank you, Sheila. Good afternoon, Councilor Asabi. For the record, my name is Katie Cahill Holloway, and as Sheila mentioned, I've moved into the acting deputy role for the Supportive Housing Division at DND. And I'd also like to echo the thanks that Sheila just gave to you for your unwavering support of our efforts to house our most vulnerable citizens. It was so great to see you and your staff at last week's housing surge at the La Brea, which was a really, really successful event. And the other thing I want to thank you for is for scheduling this hearing so expeditiously. So the order before us authorizes DND on behalf of the city to apply for, accept, and expend federal fiscal year 2017 funding for HUD's annual Continuum of Care competition. The federal fiscal year 2017 is actually the City of Boston's fiscal year 18, just for clarification. These important funds are critical to the continued operation of Boston's homeless assistance system, as you know. HUD allocates the funds through the national annual McKinney-Vento Homeless Continuum of Care funding competition. And the competition opens on an annual basis. In accordance with HUD requirements, the Boston COC submitted its 2017 registration on May 1st, 2017, and the filing of the registration makes the Boston COC eligible to compete in the 2017 competition when it opens. The up to $28 million amount on the order to apply for, accept, and expend the funds is an estimate based on HUD's registration notice. The majority of the application consists of the renewal of existing permanent housing programs. The City of Boston was awarded $24,583,209 in the 2016 competition, and those funds are being used to fund 34 grants that serve over 1,800 participants, including nearly 1,100 chronically homeless at any given point in time in permanent housing. The amount includes $21 million in eligible renewal projects, $2.9 million in new permanent housing projects, and $500,000 in COC planning costs. And the grant term for the renewal awards is for 1 year, and the city will seek continued funding for them on an annual basis. In addition to this amount, the city may be eligible to apply for COC planning funds to fully implement the Homeless Emergency Assistance and Rapid Transition to Housing, or HARTH Act requirements across the homeless assistance system and for new permanent housing bonus funds. Amounts available for these activities will be made available upon HUD's opening of the 2017 COC competition. And HUD also may make fair market rent adjustments to the rent schedules for the leasing and rental assistance programs. So we are seeking a vote amount that will cover all of the renewals plus any new or increased funding that HUD may award. So in summary, the application seeks funding for 34 grants that fund permanent housing, rental, and leasing assistance, transitional housing, and support services for permanent housing programs. The resources awarded through this application directly support the city's efforts to eliminate chronic and veterans homelessness in Boston. The current funding supports nearly 1,800 formerly homeless in housing, including nearly 1,100 chronically homeless. The funds are from HUD and are awarded in the annual COC competition. And as I mentioned, we've submitted our registration, which makes us eligible to submit an application once the NOFA opens. HUD has yet to publish it, but we anticipate that it will be released by the end of this month. And HUD's registration notice indicated that the NOFA may contain an opportunity for communities to apply for new permanent housing bonus funding. Such funds must be used to create housing for HUD priority populations, including the chronically homeless, homeless individuals and families, and youth. If this opportunity is available, D&D will solicit proposals from nonprofit homeless service providers to be included in the overall application submitted to HUD. HUD's registration notice also indicated that they may again offer planning funds as part of the COC competition, and if available, we will apply for those funds for use towards the continued redesign of our homeless assistance system, including efforts around front door triage, further rollout of the coordinated access system, coordination of rapid rehousing resources, et cetera. And finally, the renewal allocation that I mentioned earlier by project type, we fund 94% of that total grant amount goes to support permanent housing, including leasing and rental assistance activities. 1% of it goes to transitional housing. 2% goes to our homeless management information system, which tracks client-level data across the system. 1% supports our coordinated access system, which matches homeless clients to appropriate housing and supportive service resources. And 2% is towards COC planning efforts. This concludes my overview of the COC program competition and its importance to Boston's homeless assistance system and the clients we serve. I want to thank you for your time and attention, and where time is of the essence, we respectfully request action on this matter at the June 28th council meeting, and I welcome any questions you may have on this matter. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have anything else to add, Bob? Very good. When, so you anticipate the competition to open the end of this month?
The end of this, yeah.
How long is it open for?
It's generally open for about 75 days, I'd say. So last year, if it's any indication, it opened on June 29th and applications were due on September 13th.
And so why are we referring to it as fiscal year 17, which is what we are in all of our notes, but we'll be starting the new fiscal year?
Yeah, it's totally confusing. So HUD goes by, their fiscal year is basically a year behind the city of Boston's. So when they talk about COC competition, they go by fiscal year. So the fiscal year is the year in which you actually apply for the funding. And then 18 is when that funding will start to go into service. Okay. Yeah.
I still can't, I don't understand quite why they're a year behind. I mean, I get that it's just, it's.
The federal fiscal year actually started back on October 1st and runs through September 30th. So they're on a different cycle.
I didn't know if January 29th, because they open it just before our new fiscal year starts. It'd be nice if the feds were on the same page as us.
It really would be nice. It would be a lot less confusing.
And I think everybody would be more successful.
Yeah.
And you're anticipating that we'll receive this grant or this funding?
I am. I mean, it is a competition. It's not like the formula-based funding. So we really have to go in and sort of, prove that what we're doing is working. And all of the details in terms of what we're going to be evaluated on are going to be in the NOFA, but I think we have good indication. HUD has really moved towards looking at system performance measures. So How quickly are we moving people through our system? What rates of success do we have with both placing people in permanent housing and then keeping them there once they are? We've gotten, really, really sophisticated with the data that we're able to collect. And I think, what we've been able to review, indicates that we'll be very competitive in this round once again.
And can you talk a little bit about those numbers? So what are our rates of moving people into permanent housing and all of that?
Sure. So the rates in terms of, people coming out of shelter is obviously impeded by the fact that we don't have a lot of vacancy. We're really successful in terms of retaining people that we do place in permanent housing. So we're sort of dependent on applying for new funds to create additional units and also being very careful in how we target the turnover in our existing portfolio. So we have a number of efforts kind of supporting those efforts. We have a moving on pilot where our partners are evaluating clients that have been in housing and been stable in housing for a long, long time, and doing an assessment of their skills to see whether or not they're ready to move on to more independent, affordable housing. So, we're always sort of, scrambling to make the case to add to our permanent housing portfolio so we can continue to move people through our system successfully. We also obviously have done a big effort around infusing resources into our rapid rehousing system. And so that, will prove to yield, I think, many, many opportunities for people that are in shelter to move quickly to permanent housing.
That's great. And then the housing efforts, I see that you've broken up some of the work by neighborhood.
Yeah.
But can you talk about some of the shelters that we work with in particular? And I know there are, our two main city shelters, but some of the work that's happening there with accessing some of the permanent housing.
With accessing resources. So we're in the process of really constructing sort of a system-wide response. So specifically what we're working on now around rapid rehousing, the partnership that we're in the process of creating involves obviously the major city shelters, as well as Pine Street, St. Francis House, Pilgrim Shelter. We're also folding St. Francis into that as a day shelter. And really the vision is that no matter what shelter somebody presents at, that they're going to have sort of the same menu of opportunity as anybody in any other shelter. But, it's hard work and it's transformative work, but I think that we have kind of laid a foundation for good partnerships with the shelters. We have a big meeting tomorrow, really to kind of kick off the formal rollout of the Housing Works partnership, which is our rapid rehousing effort.
That's great. And in our application, are there any indicators that may put us at a weak position for this competition?
I mean, I think the one thing that may hurt us would be sort of the length of stay in our shelters. And I think that really has to do with what I talked about earlier, sort of the scarcity of appropriate resources for people coming out of shelter. What I do hope is that in the past year, we've had several of our rapid rehousing efforts come online. And I'm hoping that, the data that we have from that is sort of in the time frame that HUD will be evaluating, because we should see some improvements there due to that. I think going forward, we'll see sort of increasing success in that regard, just as rapid rehousing really comes to scale.
So HUD wants to see short lengths of stay.
Yes.
What's our average length of stay now?
Oh, gosh. I want to say it's around 180 days. And
what is the ideal? Well, the ideal is zero.
Ideal is zero, certainly.
Or one, but what is the...
HUD's vision for ideal is something that they call a high-performing community would be a length of stay of 30 days or less. And I can say that no continuum in the country has hit that yet. Yeah. So,
if I could, the point in time count has shown that our length of stay in the last year has really greatly improved. As you know, we've been working very hard to house our chronic, which they had the longest length of stay. So by getting them housed, the length of stay is shortened. Pine Street was in the other day, and I can get you the information, Counselor. It was fascinating. The length of stay at Pine Street was greatly reduced. People were coming in, staying very short periods of time and getting out. And then the chronics were getting housed. So I'll get you the numbers. They were very encouraging.
Well, I'd say some of the work around the triaging at the front door has probably really helped.
Right. So people don't come in
shortening
at all,
stay.
and so are in for a couple of nights and then leave. But the point in time count, I think from this last year compared to the year before was also, we had a significant reduction. So we can get you that, but it's moving in the right direction.
It is fascinating to know a little bit more about the details. And do you want to share, because that housing surge, I know my office, who's really, it's awkward to say they've enjoyed this work, but I think they've enjoyed participating in the success of this work. We really wish that this work wasn't necessary. But would you talk a little bit about some of the results from the surge from last week? And maybe for anyone at home viewing, perhaps just describe very quickly in a quick few captions what a housing surge is. Yes.
Sure. So a housing surge is really one-stop shopping for targeted guests of our shelter to come in, and the vision is that they're going to walk out at the end of the day with a housing offer in a service package that's going to allow them to be successful and stable in permanent housing. So we've hosted a number of these. I think I've lost count. Probably, eight.
Was this number 8?
Yep. So we've hosted 8, and I think the word has gotten out. When we were first operating the surges, we expected a return rate of maybe 20 to 30% of the invited guests, and at last week's surge, we were up at 50% return rate of invited guests. So I think the word is definitely getting out that this is for real, and people are walking out with offers of housing. So last week we had 63 people actually attend the surge, and we had from our great partner, the Boston Housing Authority, 44 offers of hard units that day, meaning that they walked out of there with their apartment address. We had 5 additional BHA offers that were sort of pending additional documentation, but we anticipate that those offers will come through with hard units. So that's just an amazing amount out of 63 to have 49 walk out of there with a public housing offer is phenomenal. We also had an additional 9 folks walk out with tenant-based vouchers from MBHP. So it sort of operates like a Section 8 program, and they're going to be starting housing search. So out of 63, that's an amazing rate of people actually walking out with housing. We had a few people that a surge can be overwhelming. We had some people that walked out. We had one gentleman that was able to be paired with a service package, and he was going the next day to look at a unit at St. Francis House. So all in all, it was highly successful.
That's great. And do you want to mention some of the city departments that are on board and some of the nonprofits that are doing?
Sure. So it absolutely takes a community. We have partnerships sort of like across the spectrum of government. You know, we have federal partners, obviously the state, OEHHS, you know, the Office of Elderly Affairs at the state was critical in terms of helping us navigate the service package side. Most of the services are through different Medicaid funded programs, and the detail and the work that goes into sort of assessing each client prior to surge to figure out what they're eligible for is a huge team effort. And also in terms of city departments, obviously city council has been very supportive. The Boston Housing Authority, we could not do it without them. And then obviously the La Brea Center for hosting us. I mean, they're so generous in letting us basically take over their building for 13 hours, which is how long we were there. So it's a very, very gratifying but effective event at the same time.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
I just wanted to add that the Boston Public Health Commission is also at the surge, you know, front and center, and they were great. And our own elderly commissioner was there helping with elder services. So you're right. It's a lot of departments, and but very successful. And if I just want to add one thing to that, and for folks that are watching this might say, well, how hard is it to offer, you know, housing and services to someone if they're homeless? But these are folks that have been homeless for very long periods of time and have a lot of obstacles to getting housed and need a lot of supports and have been homeless for very long periods of time. And as you know, sometimes aren't always trusting with, you know, towards government. So it was great that they overcame that and was able to get housed.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else to add, we'll certainly recommend this to the council for passage, I believe, at tomorrow's hearing, and that'll be it. We'll adjourn that. Thank you.
Thank you.